actually making a nice big batch of Tuscan bean soup. I'm really into beans these days. Beans are really good for you. They fill you up. They're just delicious, and this is soup has just so many great flavors, and it's pretty much guilt-free. So starting out with some olive oil. You don't need a whole ton, just a couple tablespoons. And get out your big soup pan. I think soup is a great way to eat healthy, but feel pretty good about it, depending on what you're putting in it. So this soup starts with the basics of soup, which is some onion, about a cup of onion or one small to medium onion diced up, some carrot, again about a cup of carrot finely diced, and then I'm going to get to work on some celery. This is one of the recipes in my latest cookbook. I love soup, I really do, but a lot of soups are like an all-day deal. They're really, labor intensive, and it's something that you want to do on a Sunday when you've got lots of time. This soup is actually pretty quick. In fact, about a week or so ago, it was like one of those nights where it was chilly and, fire in the fireplace, and I just was craving a warm, wonderful bowl of soup. And I looked at my pantry and my fridge and, had a few cans of beans, had some chicken stock, had an onion that needed using, some celery and some carrots, and it was like, yep, I know what I'm making. You can whip this together in about 20 minutes or less. So a lot of the recipes, especially in my latest cookbook, are even easier. I get it. I've been hearing you. I've been listening. Everyone's like, I love those recipes because they're just really, really quick and easy, and this is one of those. So I'm just dicing up some celery. Been eating a lot of soup this winter. It just makes everything all better, I think. And I know the old thing is, everybody says chicken noodle soup is so good for you. Soup in general is good for you. I mean, this soup's going to have some chicken stock in it, lots of vegetables, got everything your body needs. I'm going to get my celery in here. So lots of onions, celery, and carrots to give this soup some great flavor. Do a little more olive oil. Real important with soups to season as you go. Don't just throw in some salt and pepper at the end. So I've got some kosher salt, fresh ground black pepper, really want to season it well. Now the biggest pain about bean soup was, I'd never forget to pull the beans out and soak them all day long, or if you, skip that step. Even so, even if you pull them out and soak them, or soak them overnight, they still take a good hour or so to cook. And if you don't soak them, even longer. So we are going to make things really easy and just use some canned beans. I'm using cannellini beans, white kidney beans, same thing. And I always try and keep canned beans in my pantry. I have certain sections of my pantry, and a friend of mine really helped me get organized, where I've got those everyday staples: canned tomatoes, canned beans, canned vegetables. They all are sectioned off so that, if I'm in a crunch, a pinch, and I'm not trying to figure out what to make for dinner, got some beans, I can whip this soup together. Pantry staples are so important on days like today, where it's going to be getting really cold out later on, and you're not going to be wanting to leave the house. Well, you don't have to if you stock your pantry with things like pastas and canned tomatoes and beans and things like that. Chicken stock is something I always try and have on hand. Certain things I have in my freezer: chicken, boneless, skinless chicken breasts are always great to have, ground beef. And then I have the meat department to wrap those chicken breasts and the ground beef in butcher paper at Festival. They do that for you for free, and then it just stays fresh even longer. So I'm opening up my canned beans. That's really the hardest part of this recipe. And then I'm going to give them a quick drain and a rinse because there's this liquid in the beans, and I'm just not a big fan of it. Don't want that getting in my soup. So I'm just going to basically dump the beans in here. This recipe calls for 3 cans, 15-ounce cans of beans. You can also get the big jumbo jar of Great Northern beans, and that way you don't have to open up all the cans. You can just open up one big jar. Sometimes those are a little hard to find, and space-wise they take up a lot of room in my pantry, but either one will work fine. 3 cans or one big jar of the cannellini or white northern beans. This recipe, by the way, is super cheap to make. Canned beans are like, $1 or less a piece, and then the other vegetables that you just already have in your house that need using, really inexpensive. Just going to give these a little bit of a rinse in my colander. I'll let them hang out there for a little bit, and I'll get back to those in a minute. Just want to check my veggies. So starting to get a little bit soft. They look perfect. Now I've got some fresh garlic. If you don't have fresh garlic in the house, I always keep like a, jarred garlic in the fridge. That'll work fine too, especially in soup recipes. This recipe has so few ingredients though, and one of the stars of the show is fresh rosemary. And that's one thing that, boy, what a difference fresh rosemary makes in this soup. If you have dried rosemary, it'll work, but that's one thing I'd suggest you splurge on for this recipe. Nothing like it. All right, I'm going to get my garlic in here. And once I get my garlic in, you know the rule. Move it, move it, move it. Don't want that garlic to burn. Oh, it smells fantastic. Now I've got some chicken stock. You could certainly keep this soup vegetarian and use veggie stock. Either one will work. So chicken stock or vegetable stock, we've talked about this before, how important it is. Now I love to use the stock, which is the real deal, where they actually take the chicken and the bones and they cook it down, rather than using a lot of the broth, the different broths, and are basically bouillon cubes and salts and not really the good stuff. And I love buying it in the box like this because too you can use the stock you need and then pop the lid on, get it back in the fridge, and use this for another recipe down the road. So I basically got my stock in here, my onions, my carrots, my celery, and my vegetables, right, my garlic I should say. Now I'm going to add my beans. And I just want to bring this to a simmer. And this is, like I say, very quick. One of the tips to get it going. In fact, last night Ireland had a forensics meet, and those go late. When I was growing up, they called it speech and debate. Nowadays, they call it forensic, but they do 3 rounds and usually don't get out of there until about 7 o'clock. So anyway, she was starving, as of course all kids are. I was hungry, and we needed to get dinner on the table in a real hurry. So boy, covering that lid, we ended up cooking up some pasta. I had a slow cooker recipe. Well, I'd made my heavenly chicken, which anyway, had that going all day long, and then wanted to get some pasta going really quick. And when you cover the pot, it'll bring that to a boil a lot quicker. All right, fresh rosemary. Talked about that. We're going to put some in the soup, and then I also like to garnish the soup with fresh rosemary. And basically, kind of looks like a little Christmas tree. You take your fingers, run them down the stem. Oh, nothing like it. Smells so good. And a little goes a long way. It's really strong, so you don't need a whole ton of it. Although I like it, so I put a little extra. Some people say it's overpowering. So, especially if you're going to use the dried rosemary, I would use about half of what you're going to use as far as the fresh rosemary goes. Now, you see it's pretty, you know, it's big. So it's really important to really chop it up. Take some time and do this. You don't want to get a big old piece of rosemary when you're going to eat your soup. You want to get that great flavor, but you just don't want big chunks of rosemary in there. So this is a real important step, is to really chop it up. I'm all excited. She's like, I got a text today, Anne's going to be excited about this, from my dog groomer. Have a dog groomer that comes to the house, and I had forgotten, and they said, we're coming to give Levi a bath, a spa treatment today. So by tonight, he's going to be smelling good. Nothing like giving the old boy a big hug after a nice bath. Okay. He doesn't like it too much, but the rest of us do. Okay, so you see how I've really taken a little bit of time just to make sure that this is all chopped up nice and fine. Do you like the smell of fresh rosemary, Anne? I don't know. To me, it is just one of the best smells. Mm.
I like garlic better.
Anne says she likes the smell of garlic better. Well, I happen to like that too. So at home, you'll let this simmer a little bit longer. One of the things that I like to do is take a potato masher. In this case, we're going to use the chopster gadget that I love so much, that we usually use to brown ground beef or ground pork, and just kind of mash up these beans just a little bit. And that's up to you. That's going to make the soup a little bit thicker and more creamy. And they mash so easily because they're already canned beans. So it's up to you how mashed up you want them to be. But let this simmer just for a little bit. And like I say, 20 minutes or so, you've got soup. I like to do some fresh rosemary, of course, in the soup, and then save a little bit to put on top as well. And then I love to serve this. And you see how, I mean, we didn't put any butter in this. Everything in here is all good. We just used a little bit of oil. In fact, you can even cut back on the oil. All sorts of good stuff. Some nice bread for dipping would be fantastic. Dunking, soaking up every little last bit of it. Get lots of that broth in here. And I like to garnish this with a little bit more of the rosemary. And this is optional. You don't have to do this, but it's really wonderful with just a little dab will do you of grated fresh Parmesan cheese over the top. There you go. My Tuscan bean soup, so good, and it's actually really good for you too. Recipes on the website. It's also one of the recipes in my latest cookbook, and you can pick it up at any area Festival Foods.